Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're diving into minimalist interior design, and more specifically, living rooms.
Sounds great.
We got some really cool Vietnamese sources.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One that kind of outlines the core principles and trends, and then another that highlights a specific company.
Interesting.
I think after this deep dive, you're going to understand like what this style is all about, the benefits, and how to achieve it.
Awesome.
So let's just jump right into it.
Okay.
When we say minimalism in interior design, what does that actually mean?
Yeah.
Is it just like having less stuff?
It's definitely more nuanced than that. It's
Right.
not just about having less stuff, but it's about, like you said, being really intentional with the things that you do bring into your space.
Okay.
One of the sources that we're looking at uses the Vietnamese term "thui dinh,"
Okay.
which means simplification.
I like that.
Yeah. And I think that that really gets at the heart of what this aesthetic is. It's not about emptiness, but it's about creating a sense of calm and clarity by paring back to the essentials.
So I've always struggled with incorporating bold colors in my home.
Uh,
Is there a way to incorporate them in a minimalist space without sort of like disrupting that sense of calm? Or are we talking like strictly neutrals here?
that's a great question.
Yeah.
And it kind of gets at this misconception that minimalism equals just like a stark white box.
Right.
Um, while neutrals definitely are kind of the foundation of a minimalist palette, it's not about eliminating color altogether.
Okay.
So think of those neutrals like your whites, your beiges, your grays, your light browns. They create this like sense of spaciousness and tranquility. It's like a canvas.
Okay.
But you can add pops of color strategically.
Gotcha.
Like a single piece of artwork with a vibrant hue or a few carefully chosen accessories can add personality without being overwhelming.
So you're not saying no color.
Yeah.
Just very deliberately.
Exactly.
I see.
And that gets back to that intentionality that we were talking about earlier.
Right.
Speaking of intentionality,
Yeah.
why do we think minimalism is having such a moment right now?
Hmm.
One of our sources talks about how our lives are busier and more visually stimulating than ever before.
That's true.
So a minimalist living room can be this sanctuary.
I like that.
From all of that chaos,
Yeah.
it can be a place to breathe, relax, recharge.
Yeah. There's a reason why everyone loves those decluttering videos online.
Yeah, totally.
There's something really satisfying about like simplifying your surroundings.
Absolutely.
But I'm curious, besides the aesthetic appeal,
Mm.
what are some of the practical benefits of like a minimalist living room?
Well, our source highlights a few.
Okay.
First, there's the reduction of distractions, which can be a game changer for focus and productivity.
Yeah.
You know, there's actually been studies that show that visual clutter can increase your cortisol levels.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, leading to stress and a decreased attention span.
Really?
So by minimizing those distractions, you create a space that promotes mental clarity.
Yeah, I feel like I've definitely experienced that. Like when my living room starts to feel cluttered, it's almost like that spills over into my mind.
Ugh.
And then I just feel overwhelmed. So less clutter, less stress. I like it.
Exactly.
Why not?
Well, our source also talks about how much easier it is to clean a minimalist space,
Right.
which I think is something we can all appreciate. With fewer items to dust and rearrange, cleaning just becomes a much less daunting task.
I'm all about that.
Right.
Absolutely.
And then there's also the benefit of cost effectiveness.
Oh,
When you're surrounded by only things you need and love, you're less likely to impulse buy a bunch of unnecessary items.
oh, that makes sense. You're not as tempted.
Exactly.
Okay. So less stress, more time, potentially more money in my pocket.
Exactly.
I'm liking this minimalist thing.
Right.
But okay, let's get into the nitty gritty.
Okay.
How do we actually make this happen?
Yeah.
Like, how do we achieve minimalist living room nirvana?
Well, one of our sources outlines some key principles.
Okay.
And the first one is thinking about furniture.
Okay.
And not just about having less furniture,
But-
but choosing pieces that can serve multiple purposes.
Oh, so it's that whole less is more philosophy?
Exactly.
Okay.
So think about things like a sofa bed that can accommodate guests, or a coffee table with built-in storage.
Oh, like those lift-top coffee tables?
Yes, exactly.
Can also be like a little desk.
Exactly. And that's a trend that we're seeing a lot globally as people are trying to maximize their space,
Right.
especially, you know, in smaller apartments.
Makes sense.
And speaking of minimizing clutter,
Yeah?
this source really emphasizes editing down to only the essentials.
Okay.
So the focus is on functionality
Functionality.
over purely decorative items.
Okay.
And there's even a quote from this article that says, less is more is the golden rule.
So it's not just about like having less stuff, but it's about being more mindful about the things that you choose to keep.
Exactly.
I'm curious, like, how do you personally decide what is truly essential when it comes to your living space?
That's such a good question.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's something that I think evolves over time. But for me, it starts with asking myself a few key questions about each item. Does it serve a purpose? Does it bring me joy? Does it align with the overall aesthetic that I'm going for?
Yeah.
And if I can't answer yes to at least one of those questions, it's probably time to let it go.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's not about getting rid of things entirely,
Right.
but finding a more intentional way to store them.
That's like curating your space rather than just purging it.
Exactly.
I like that.
And then another thing that plays a really big role in creating that curated minimalist feel is natural light.
Oh, yeah.
Our source recommends things like large windows, sheer curtains, open layouts,
Yeah.
all those things that really maximize the flow of light.
I've always been drawn to spaces with lots of natural light. I just think there's something about it that feels uplifting
Yeah.
and energizing.
Yeah.
What do you think it is about natural light that makes such a difference in a minimalist space?
Yeah, it really is.
It's not even just about brightness. I feel like it's about creating a sense of airiness and expansiveness,
Totally.
which is so key for minimalist design.
It makes the space feel larger and more inviting.
Yeah.
And there's even research that highlights the positive impact of natural light on mood,
Oh,
sleep patterns,
wow.
even productivity.
It's like a design hack for a happier, healthier life.
Exactly.
Okay. So we've talked about color furniture, clutter, natural light. What other elements should we be thinking about when we're trying to achieve that minimalist living room?
One thing that I think often gets overlooked is texture.
Okay.
Our sources don't really talk about this too much, but it's so important for creating a space that feels warm and inviting rather than cold and sterile.
Yeah, I was thinking about that earlier.
Yeah.
Like if you have too many smooth surfaces and just neutral colors, it can almost feel a little impersonal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Texture adds visual interest and depth without being overwhelming.
Okay.
So think about incorporating different textures through textiles,
Heck.
like a chunky knit throw on your sofa,
Oh, yeah.
a woven rug on the floor, linen curtains.
Makes sense.
You could even bring texture in through wall treatments.
Oh, interesting. Like a textured wallpaper or a natural fiber wall hanging.
So it's not about eliminating all visual stimulation.
Right.
It's just being really deliberate about the type that you're bringing in.
Mm.
How do you incorporate personality
Yeah.
into a minimalist living room?
Yeah.
Because I feel like that's something people get hung up on. It's
Well-
how do you make it feel like your own without cluttering it up?
Totally. And there are ways to do that.
Okay.
One really, if I would love to know, how are minimalist principles being interpreted and adapted in Vietnam?
Yeah. It's really interesting.
What did our sources tell us?
Well, one of them mentions this company called ATZLUXURY, which specializes in minimalist design.
Okay, so clearly it is a thing in Vietnam.
Yeah, it seems to be gaining some traction there.
I'm curious to know how Vietnamese designers are putting their own spin on this style.
Totally. I mean, Vietnam has such a rich design heritage
Yeah.
with a strong emphasis on natural materials,
Okay.
craftsmanship, connection to nature.
So I could see them maybe blending those clean lines with bamboo rattan lacquer,
Yeah, absolutely.
maybe incorporating some of their traditional patterns or motifs in a really subtle minimalist way.
That'd be cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a cool cultural remix.
It speaks to this idea that this desire for simplicity and intentionality, it really is universal,
Yeah,
but there's still room for personal and cultural expression.
totally. And we're seeing this more and more in the world of design, this blending of global and local aesthetics, right? It's like a global conversation.
Exactly.
But how do you adapt minimalism to different personalities and needs? Because let's be real.
Yeah.
Not everyone's going to want to live in a space that feels like a museum.
You're so right. Minimalism is definitely not a one-size-fits-all approach.
Yeah.
It's about finding what works for you
For you.
and your lifestyle.
Okay.
For some people, that might mean going super pared back,
Okay.
limited color palette, very few possessions. But for others, it might mean just decluttering and simplifying,
Okay.
but still surrounding themselves with things that hold meaning and bring them joy.
So it's more about the underlying philosophy of intentionality rather than adhering to these strict rules.
Exactly. It's about aligning your physical environment with
Yeah.
your values and your priorities.
So what are those things that bring you a sense of calm and well-being? What supports your lifestyle
Right.
and allows you to live more authentically?
Exactly.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah.
So I'm picturing someone who loves to cook and they have this minimalist kitchen that's pared back.
Yeah.
but it's still fully equipped with all their high-quality cookware
Exactly.
and their tools.
It's about creating a space that supports your passions.
Yeah.
And allows you to do what you love.
Without distractions.
Exactly.
So it's not about deprivation. It's about creating a space that actually empowers you.
Exactly.
I really like that. It takes away the pressure of like having to achieve this like unattainable level of emptiness.
Right.
It's more about just like curating a space that feels functional and inspiring. And it's for you.
Exactly. And I think it's important to remember that minimalism is a journey.
Okay.
It's not a destination.
Right.
It's not about achieving this perfect state of emptiness, but rather just continually reassessing what you need.
Okay.
And what brings you joy.
So it's almost like a mindfulness practice applied to your living space.
Totally.
You're constantly checking in
Yeah.
and making sure that like your surroundings are supporting you,
Right.
reflecting your values.
It's about being present.
Yeah.
In your space.
Yeah. I love this. This has been really insightful.
Yeah?
I feel very inspired now to take a look at my own living room
Good.
and maybe see if I can incorporate some of these principles. Do you have any advice for getting started?
You know, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. Even small changes
Okay.
can make a big difference.
Yeah.
So maybe start by just decluttering like a single shelf.
Mm.
Or rearranging your furniture to maximize the natural light.
Yeah. Sometimes just like a little shift in perspective
Right.
is all you need to like spark some positive change.
Totally. And as you start to experiment with these principles,
Mm-hmm.
you know, your definition of essential might change over time. What was important to you a year ago might not hold the same significance today.
That's so true.
And that's okay.
That's all part of the process.
Is that
It's
correct?
growth and evolution.
Yeah. Our needs and priorities are constantly shifting.
So our homes should too.
Yeah.
It's not about these rigid rules,
Right.
but it's about using these principles as a framework to create a space that feels really authentic
Yeah.
and aligned with your values.
Yeah.
And I love how we've seen
Yeah.
from these Vietnamese sources
Yes.
that those principles can be interpreted
In so many ways.
in so many ways.
It's really exciting to see minimalist design being embraced and adapted all over the world.
It's a global conversation
Uh-huh.
about simplicity and intentionality and well-being
Exactly.
expressed through design.
I love that.
And I think that conversation is only going to continue to grow as our lives become more complex and demanding.
Absolutely.
That need for simplicity and clarity is only going to get stronger. It's like everyone wants to create that sanctuary
Yeah.
away from the chaos.
Totally.
And it doesn't have to be cold or sterile. It could be warm,
Right.
inviting, personal.
It's that sweet spot
Yeah.
between simplicity and soul.
What stands out to you as like the most compelling thing about minimalist living room design? Like,
Yeah.
what's your favorite part?
It really is.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are looking for that sense
Yeah.
of freedom and clarity.
Yep.
And it's so cool to think that like something as simple as redesigning your living room
Mm-hmm.
could actually like be a catalyst for that shift.
Totally. It's all about recognizing that connection between our inner and outer worlds.
Right.
You know, when you create that sense of harmony in your physical space,
Mm.
it can have a ripple effect on other areas of your life.
Have you personally experienced that, like after embracing minimalist principles?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
I used to be such a collector,
Mm.
always bringing home new books, art supplies, objects.
I feel that.
And while I still appreciate those things, I've become much more mindful
Okay.
about what I bring into my space.
That makes sense.
And I've really noticed that the more I simplify my physical surroundings, the more clarity I feel in my thoughts and emotions.
It's like you're literally creating space in your mind by
Yeah.
creating space in your home.
Exactly.
It's almost like minimalism is a form of meditation,
Yeah.
like a way to bring mindfulness into your daily life.
I think there's a lot of truth to that.
Yeah.
When you're surrounded by less distractions, it's easier to just be present
Uh-huh.
and appreciate the simple things.
It's not just about aesthetics at that point. It's like cultivating a certain way of being,
Exactly.
more grounded, more intentional,
Right.
ultimately more fulfilling.
I love that.
As we kind of wrap up our deep dive into minimalist living rooms, I think it's important to remember that this is just like the beginning.
Yeah, we've just scratched the surface.
There's so much more to explore
Absolutely.
within this whole philosophy.
And especially how it's being interpreted in Vietnam.
Right.
I'm really excited to see how this movement continues to evolve
Yeah.
and inspire creativity.
Across cultures.
Yeah, it's really cool.
I would love to leave our listeners with a final thought-provoking question
Okay.
to kind of ponder on their own time.
I like it.
Could embracing minimalism in your living room actually lead to a greater sense of calm and focus in other areas of your life?
That's a great question for everyone to think about. And I really encourage you to explore that for yourself.
Yeah.
You might be surprised.
Even just like making these small changes
Right.
could lead to like a really big shift. So start small, declutter a drawer, let go of a few things you don't really use or love.
Exactly.
Or just like take a minute to appreciate the beauty
Yeah.
of a clutter-free space.
And remember, there's no right or wrong way to do this. It's all about what works for you
Exactly.
and what brings you joy.
Well, this has been so fun. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into minimalist living rooms.
Yeah, this was great.
We hope you feel inspired to create a space that truly reflects you
Absolutely.
and supports your well-being.
Thanks for having me. Until next time, keep seeking simplicity and embracing the beauty of less.
I love that. See you, everyone.